We recently took our first Mediterranean cruise and we really enjoyed it as it docked in some very beautiful and interesting ports.
After we'd been on our first ever cruise on board Iona, we thought we'd book another cruise as we loved it so much, but these were two very different cruises.
This cruise was a fly cruise, which meant that we'd have to fly to a foreign country to embark it. In our case, we were assigned a flight from London Gatwick to Malta.
The flight's normally about 3 hours long, but most of the planes that P&O charter are comfortable, so you probably won't notice.
About 6 weeks before you embark your cruise, you'll receive your flight details from P&O. You're most likely to fly with TUI or Jet2, as we found that P&O mostly use those airlines when flying to the Mediterranean.
After you land in Malta, you'll be taken to a bus which will take you to Valletta Grand Harbour. This will be included in your cruise fare. The bus ride was about 15 minutes long.
Once you arrive at the port, you'll need to go and see a P&O Cruises employee who'll check your boarding pass, and if you're travelling with children under the age of 13, they'll need to collect a wristband with their muster station on it. They'll need to wear this for the entire cruise.
After you've done this, you'll be sent out to the ship. As you board Azura, you'll walk into this central area called the atrium. We found the atrium very nice, and it's right in the middle of decks 5, 6 and 7, which is where a lot of the dining and entertainment is on board.
After we had a look at the atrium, we took the lift to our cabin. Our cabin was on deck 9 and it was a superior deluxe balcony cabin, sometimes called a mini suite by other cruise lines. Our first impressions of the cabin were that it was really clean, large and spacious. We really liked the extra space that you wouldn't find in a regular cabin.
Because we were on deck 9, our cabin was overlooked by 5 whole decks of cabins. But we were fine with this as we didn't really find it a big problem. This is the same on deck 10, but if you don't want your cabin to be overlooked, these cabins are on decks 11 to 15.
After the mandatory safety briefing that must be completed on every cruise, we went for our first dinner on board. You can choose when booking your cruise whether you want freedom or club dining. Club dining means that you have to go to the Oriental restaurant at a certain time of the evening. However, freedom dining means that you have the choice of Peninsula and Meridian restaurants at any point in the evening.
We decided to go to the Meridian restaurant on the first night, and we had the same meal that we had on the first nights of our cruise on board Iona, as we loved it so much.
However, we noticed that this food was ever so slightly different to what we had on Iona, but it was still just as amazing.
We went up to the top deck for a drink while there was still some daylight. We had the refreshed drinks package on this cruise, meaning we could have up to 15 glasses of Pepsi, Sprite or fruit juice every day. We don't suggest you buy a drinks package unless you plan on drinking a lot during your cruise, or if you want to save some money.
For more information on Azura's food and beverages, you can click the link to our full video on the screen now.
We were delayed sailing away from Valletta, as there was a highly delayed flight from Manchester that landed a few hours late, but it gave us a chance to see a fireworks display for a festival that takes place every year in Malta.
The next day of our itinerary was a sea day. A sea day is a day of a cruise when the ship travels to the next destination, and the length of your sea day depends on how far away your next destination is.
Sea days are normally really busy on cruise ships, especially the big ones such as Iona. Azura was actually really quiet, especially as she was full capacity during our cruise.
On the first sea day, we recommend finding your bearings around the ship. You could try to make benchmarks such as the atrium and the bars and restaurants.
As usual, the first sea day was a gala night. On gala nights, you need to dress smart for dinner, and you have to stay dressed like that for the rest of the evening, unless you're in your cabin.
The food on formal nights is always really good, and we had some delicious sushi for our starters and tacos for our main course. On the first formal night on most cruises, the captain will invite you to the atrium for a welcome speech. This happened at 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. on Azura.
The first port of call of this cruise was Ajaccio in Corsica. Corsica's a long island below France, but it was actually very different to France. They have their own variant of French called Corsican, and it has its own government too.
P&O offer many different excursions in Corsica, and we booked to go up the mountains of Ajaccio. The journey was on a minibus, unlike other cruise excursions, but they couldn't use a bigger bus as the route goes too close to the edge of high mountain, which was quite scary for everyone.
The excursion takes you to multiple different areas of the Corsican mountains, and you get 10 to 15 minutes per stop.
We then returned to the port of Ajaccio and had some biscuits and donuts using P&O's £2 room service.
On this night, we went to a dining venue called Sindhu. Sindhu's P&O's signature Indian dining venue with many delicious curry dishes.
The portions are a lot bigger than you'd expect, but they were still really good. After another Pepsi on the top deck, we sailed away for our next port of Villefranche.
On this port day, we took an excursion to Monaco. Monaco's the second smallest country in the world, and it borders Nice in France and the French Riviera in Italy. Monaco was nice and quiet, with lots of interesting buildings.
Next, this excursion took us to Monte Carlo, which is the largest city in Monaco. It was really warm in Monte Carlo, and it was busy as the MSC Seaview cruise ship had many excursions coming from Cannes, so there were always loads of people wherever we went.
Other than that, Monte Carlo was a nice place, and we even got to stand on the steps of the St. Nicholas Cathedral.
We took the bus back to the port, which was a tender port. This means that you need to catch a small boat to your ship, usually provided by the port or one of the ship's lifeboats. After relaxing on the top deck and going to dinner, we made our way to the port of Livorno in Italy.
In Livorno, we took an excursion to Florence and Pisa. After an approximately 45-minute drive, we reached the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It was nice to see it, but it was very busy, and there wasn't much else to do in Pisa apart from looking in gift shops.
Next, the bus took us to Florence. Florence was the hottest place we'd been on the cruise so far, and everyone on cruise excursions was going into shops just for the air conditioning. There was a lot more to do in Florence than Pisa, and we even managed to get some Italian gelato, which melted almost instantly.
After the long drive back to the port, we had dinner and a few more glasses of Pepsi. Then it was time for our next port.
Civitavecchia.
We took an excursion to the Coliseum, and this excursion included pizza and gelato. The Coliseum was absolutely boiling, but it was worth it to get to see such a famous place. As we were on an organised excursion, we got priority going through security and up to the main area of the Coliseum.
The good thing about this tour was that they gave us earphones and a small device used for listening to your tour guide. We then walked to the underground restaurant where they served us our ice cream and pizza.
The bus to get back to the ship wasn't very well air-conditioned, but luckily we bought our own rechargeable handheld fans on this cruise ship as we knew it would be very hot. The next day was a sea day, which meant that the ship would be heading back to Valletta. We tried P&O's vegetarian burger from the Lido grill, and we're happy to report it was really good.
We recommend that you make the most of any onboard spending money that you have left on the last sea day, as you won't have much time to if you have an early disembarkation time.
The final day of this cruise was when we docked in Valletta in Malta. We disembarked at about 10 a.m. and took the bus to Malta Airport, which got really busy really fast.
P&O also allow you to self-disembark if you have your own flights booked to somewhere outside of the UK, or if you'd like to stay in your disembarkation port for longer and book your own flights home.
Thank you for watching our full review of our cruise on board P&O Azura. Overall, we think this was a great cruise as we really enjoyed all the ports. We'd highly recommend taking a cruise on Ajaccio as it's the perfect size yet still very spacious and entertaining.